The day the stagecoach stopped at the edge of the prairie, the wind was sharp enough to sting the skin, and the land looked as empty as the man waiting beside the fence. The cowboy had stood there for a long time, boots buried in dust, eyes fixed on the horizon, carrying years of silence on his shoulders. He did not know it yet, but this moment, this arrival, would test everything he believed about loneliness, strength, and the quiet power of compassion. Before the story unfolds any further, take a moment right now. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that broken lives can still find hope, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to the channel Wild West Tale. Your support helps these stories reach hearts that need them. The cowboy had built his life far from people, not out of hatred but out of exhaustion. Years of disappointment had taught him that the land was easier to understand than human promises. The prairie never pretended to be gentle. It demanded work, patience, and honesty, and in return it offered survival. His days were long and repetitive, sunrise chores, endless fences, restless horses, and nights spent listening to the wind move through empty rooms. The house he lived in had been meant for a family once, but time had stripped it down to bare necessity. Every sound echoed. Every evening reminded him of what was missing. Choosing a mail-order bride had not been an act of romance. It had been an act of quiet surrender to the truth that no one was meant to endure life completely alone. The decision embarrassed him at first, as if admitting loneliness was a weakness. But the longer he lived with the silence, the more unbearable it became. So he wrote a letter, signed his name, and waited without expectations. When she arrived, she did not look like someone ready for a new life on harsh land. She looked tired, smaller than the open world around her, carrying her belongings in a single worn case. Her eyes held caution, not excitement. The cowboy noticed how she stood carefully, as if afraid the ground itself might betray her. He noticed how she avoided sudden movements, how her breath sometimes caught when she stepped down from the coach. Still, she tried to smile. Still, she nodded politely, as though grateful simply to be allowed to exist somewhere. From the beginning, their life together felt more like coexistence than partnership. They shared meals in silence, passed each other in narrow hallways, and worked side by side without truly seeing one another. The cowboy assumed she needed time. He gave her space because that was the only kindness he understood. What he did not understand was the weight she carried inside her body and her heart. She worked harder than necessary, pushing herself even when pain made her movements stiff and slow. Some mornings she struggled to rise, yet she forced herself into motion as if rest were a luxury she could not afford. The cowboy noticed small things, how she sometimes paused to steady herself, how her face lost color when she thought no one was watching. He told himself it was none of his business. He told himself that people came with their own burdens and that asking questions might open wounds better left untouched. But loneliness has a way of sharpening awareness. In the long evenings, as oil lamps flickered and shadows stretched across the walls, he felt an unease growing. The house was no longer empty, yet it did not feel alive. Something was wrong, and ignoring it felt like repeating an old mistake, choosing silence over care. The confession did not come in a dramatic outburst. It came quietly, as most truths do. One night, after a day that had taken too much from her strength, the weight of pretending became heavier than the fear of being rejected. Her body had been hurting for a long time, long before she ever stepped onto the prairie. She had learned to endure pain without complaint because the world had taught her that suffering was expected and attention was undeserved. She believed that if she stayed useful, stayed quiet, stayed grateful, she might finally earn a place where she would not be sent away. When she finally allowed that truth to surface, it was not only a confession of physical pain but of years spent feeling invisible. The cowboy listened, and in that moment something shifted inside him. He had always believed strength meant enduring alone, but standing there, faced with her vulnerability, he realized how wrong that belief had been. Strength, he discovered, was the willingness to step forward when someone else could no longer stand on their own. He did not react with frustration or disappointment. He did not see her as a burden. Instead, he felt a responsibility settle into his bones, steady and unshakable. For the first time in many years, his life had given him a purpose beyond survival. He took action not because he felt obligated, but because he chose to care. He sought help, asked questions, and did what he could with the limited resources of a remote frontier life. Each step he took was a quiet promise that she would no longer face her pain alone. Healing did not arrive quickly or easily. There were days when progress felt invisible and nights when fear returned, whispering doubts about the future. But something fundamental had changed. The house no longer echoed with emptiness. It echoed with presence. Even silence felt different when shared with understanding. Slowly, her strength began to return, not only in her body, but in her spirit. She laughed more freely. She allowed herself to rest. She began to believe that her worth was not measured by how much suffering she could hide. The cowboy changed as well. Caring for someone else softened the hard edges he had built around himself. He learned to notice emotions he had spent years ignoring. He learned that companionship was not about filling silence with words, but about being willing to stand beside someone when words failed. The prairie did not change, but the way he saw it did. What once felt endless and isolating now felt open and full of possibility. As seasons passed, the land bloomed and withered and bloomed again. The rhythms of ranch life remained, but they were no longer hollow routines. They became shared experiences. Each sunrise carried a sense of continuity rather than repetition. Each sunset felt earned rather than endured. Together, they built something fragile and strong at the same time, a life shaped not by grand declarations but by consistent care. Near the end of this story, before the final moments settle in, we want to ask you something from the heart. If this story has touched you even a little, if it reminded you of the power of compassion or the courage it takes to open up, please pause and leave a comment sharing how it made you feel. Your words matter more than you know. The greatest challenge they faced was not the illness, nor the isolation, nor the harsh land. It was the fear that honesty might lead to abandonment. When that fear was finally confronted and proven wrong, everything else became survivable. The cowboy did not rescue her in the way stories often exaggerate. Instead, he stood beside her, steady and present, allowing healing to happen without shame. And in doing so, he healed parts of himself he never knew were broken. As the story draws toward its end, the prairie stretches wide once more, but it no longer feels empty. Two people stand within it, changed not by miracles, but by choice. They chose to listen. They chose to stay. They chose to believe that even lives shaped by hardship could still hold tenderness. If this story reached your heart, if it made you feel seen, hopeful, or quietly emotional, please like the video, share it, and subscribe to Wild West Tale. Your engagement helps keep stories like this alive and reaching others who may need them just as much as you did. And just before you go, we invite you one last time. Comment below and tell us what this story meant to you. Your voice completes the journey.